My teenage son said, "Honestly, you're just bitter because mom upgraded." I quietly got up, took the car keys, and left. The next morning, he had no ride to school and found out who had been covering their rent. All right, settle in because this is going to be a long one. This happened over the course of about 4 months, and I'm still dealing with the aftermath. Names have been changed except for family members, and I've got screenshots of some of the text exchanges if anyone thinks this sounds too crazy to be true. I 45 male, been divorced from my ex-wife Amanda for 3 years now. We have one son together, Dylan, who's 17, and has been living with his mom most of the time under our custody arrangement. Standard weekend dad setup, every other weekend plus holidays. Here's some background about me that's relevant to this story. I'm a senior HVAC technician. Been doing it for 22 years now. Worked my way up from apprentice to running my own crews. I make around $87,000 a year. Plus, I've got a side business where I do residential repairs and installations on weekends. Not glamorous work, but it's honest, it's in demand, and I'm good at it. I've got my EPA certifications, my electrical license, and I can fix pretty much anything mechanical that breaks in your house. I own my own truck, all my tools are paid for, and I've never been unemployed for more than a week since I started in this trade. When the economy tanked in 2008, construction guys were struggling to find work, but people still needed their air conditioning fixed. When COVID hit and everyone was working from home, suddenly everyone needed their HVAC systems running perfectly. It's recession-proof work. The divorce happened because Amanda got tired of struggling on my income. She wanted the big house, the fancy cars, the country club lifestyle. I was making decent money, but not enough to fund her Instagram dreams. She started making comments about how I lacked ambition and wasn't reaching my potential. The final straw was when she suggested I should go back to school and get into management or sales because working with my hands was beneath her. After the divorce, Amanda moved into a nice apartment and started dating. She was looking for her upgrade, and boy did she think she found one. Enter Chad. Yes, his real name is actually Chad, which should have been a red flag from the start. Chad works as a financial advisor at some investment firm downtown, makes around $155,000 a year, drives a BMW, wears those expensive polo shirts, the whole finance bro package. Chad represents everything Amanda thought she wanted. White-collar job, nice income, respectable career she could brag about to her friends. They got married about a year ago in this ridiculous ceremony that cost more than my truck. Dylan was the ring bearer, and I had to sit there watching my ex-wife marry a guy who'd been telling my son that blue-collar work was for people who couldn't make it in the real world. Now here's where my secret weapon enters the story. And this is the part that makes everything that follows possible. My neighbor, who I'll just call my neighbor because he values his privacy, is the most important character in this whole drama. This guy moved in next to me about 6 months after my divorce. He's 52, drives a beat-up Ford pickup truck that's probably 15 years old, dresses like he shops at Walmart, and you'd never look at him twice if you passed him on the street. He looks like every other divorced middle-aged guy in America. What you wouldn't know is that this man is worth approximately $8.3 million. My neighbor invented some incredibly boring software back in the early 2000s. Something about inventory management for manufacturing companies. He sold the company in 2019 for stupid money, invested it conservatively, and now he just manages his portfolio and does whatever he wants. He chose to live in a modest neighborhood, drive an old truck, and keep his wealth completely private. We became friends because I helped him fix his garage door when he first moved in, and he was impressed that I didn't try to upsell him on a bunch of stuff he didn't need. We started talking regularly, and eventually he told me about his background. He's one of those guys who got rich by being smart with money, rather than spending it on status symbols. My neighbor has a particular hatred for people who look down on working-class folks while living beyond their means. When I told him about the situation with Dylan, Amanda, and Chad, he was immediately interested in helping me teach them a lesson. Now, here's what Dylan doesn't know, and what makes this story possible. About 8 months ago, Amanda called me in tears. Chad's fancy lifestyle came with some conditions she hadn't anticipated. The guy made her sign a prenup that basically said if she brought any financial baggage into the marriage, she was responsible for handling it herself. Amanda had been keeping her old condo as a rental property, but the tenants moved out suddenly, and she couldn't find new ones quickly enough to cover the mortgage. Chad's response when she asked for help? That's not my responsibility. You should have sold it before we got married. So Amanda was facing foreclosure on a property that would destroy her credit and potentially affect Dylan's living situation. She begged me to help, and like an idiot, I agreed to start making the $2,100 monthly mortgage payments to keep her afloat. But here's the thing. I convinced my neighbor to loan me the money by presenting it as an investment opportunity. My neighbor thought it was hilarious that I was essentially subsidizing Chad's successful lifestyle without anyone knowing about it. The second thing Dylan doesn't know, his car. Dylan drives a 2019 Ford Mustang that he absolutely loves. Amanda told him it was a gift from Chad for getting good grades. But the truth is, I bought it. It's titled in my name, and my neighbor co-signed the loan because my credit took a hit during the divorce. Dylan thinks Chad bought him this car as a symbol of their new family's success. The third thing, Dylan's college fund. Amanda has been telling people that Chad set up a college fund for Dylan using family money from Chad's side. The truth is, my neighbor and I have been contributing to an account that now has about $78,000 in it. Amanda thinks this money comes from Chad's generosity and financial planning skills. So for almost a year, I've been secretly funding Dylan's lifestyle while watching him worship Chad as some kind of father figure. I kept telling myself it was worth it because Dylan was happy and doing well in school. I figured eventually he'd grow out of the hero worship and appreciate what I was doing for him. I was wrong. This all came to a head 3 months ago, during what was supposed to be a normal weekend visit. I picked Dylan up on Friday night, and immediately I could tell something was different about his attitude toward me. The first red flag was when we got to my apartment. I live in a decent 2-bedroom place. Nothing fancy, but it's clean, comfortable, and paid for. Dylan walks in and immediately starts complaining about how basic everything looks compared to Chad's house. Dad, why don't you ever upgrade anything? This place looks like a college dorm. I asked what he meant, and Dylan launched into this comparison of my furniture versus Chad's designer stuff. Apparently, Chad had just bought some $4,000 couch, and my perfectly functional couch from Ashley Furniture was suddenly embarrassing. Saturday morning, I made breakfast. Eggs, hash browns, bacon, the works. This used to be Dylan's favorite weekend tradition, but now he's sitting at the table on his phone, barely eating. I asked about school, and Dylan looked at me like I'd asked him to explain quantum physics. Why do you even care about my grades? It's not like you can help me with anything important. That stung, but I pressed him on what he meant. Turns out Chad had been mentoring Dylan about his future career. According to Chad, trade work was for people who couldn't make it in the real world. Chad was pushing Dylan toward finance because that's where smart people make real money. I reminded Dylan that I'd been building his college fund for years so he could study whatever he wanted. Dylan actually laughed at me. Dad, Chad makes more in bonuses than you make all year. We don't need your money. The disrespect was bad enough, but what really got to me was the dismissive way he said it. Like my years of saving and sacrifice meant nothing because Chad had a bigger paycheck. Saturday afternoon, Dylan's friend Mason came over to hang out. I've known Mason since the kids were in elementary school. Good kid, respectful family. Mason started talking about his dad's new pickup truck, and Dylan just went off. At least your dad has a real job, Mason. My dad fixes air conditioners for a living. It's so embarrassing when people ask what my parents do for work. I was standing right there in my own kitchen, and Dylan continued. My stepdad says guys like my dad are why America's falling behind other countries. No ambition, no drive to better themselves. Just punching a clock until they retire. Mason looked incredibly uncomfortable. This kid has been coming to my house for years, and he'd never heard Dylan talk about me this way. Dude, your dad's always been cool to me, Mason said. Dylan shrugged. That's before I understood how the world actually works. Chad's been teaching me about success and goal setting. My dad's basically a cautionary tale about what happens when you don't apply yourself. I walked outside to my truck and just sat there for a few minutes. My neighbor happened to be working in his yard, and he could see I was upset. He came over and asked what was wrong. I told him what Dylan had just said, and my neighbor's face got hard. Kid needs a reality check. When do we pull the plug? Soon, I said. Real soon. Sunday morning was the final straw. Dylan was going on about Chad's new watch, some $12,000 Rolex that he bought for closing a big deal. Dylan was practically worshiped this thing, talking about how it represented real success and making it in life. Then Dylan said something that I'll never forget. I can't wait until I'm successful like Chad. No offense, Dad, but you're kind of a cautionary tale about what happens when you don't apply yourself in life. Mason, who was staying over, asked Dylan why he was being such a jerk to me. That's when Dylan dropped the nuclear bomb. Look around, Mason. My dad's a loser. My mom figured that out and upgraded to someone better. Chad's everything my dad isn't. Successful, respected, actually going somewhere in life. My dad fixes other people's problems because he can't fix his own. He said this while looking directly at me, called me a loser to my face in front of his friend, in my own home, while I was making him breakfast. I set down my coffee cup, looked Dylan in the eye, and said, "Interesting perspective. We'll see how that works out for you." That's when I texted my neighbor. It's time. I drove Dylan back to Amanda's Sunday night without saying another word. The kid was confused by my sudden silence, but I wasn't in the mood for conversation. When we got there, I told him to have a good week and that I'd see him later. Dylan asked when later was, and I said I'd let him know. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't schedule our next weekend visit. Monday morning, I called in a personal day and met my neighbor at a diner to plan our strategy. My neighbor was practically excited. Turns out he'd been waiting for an excuse to mess with entitled people for months. "So what's the plan?" he asked, stirring his coffee. "Simple. We pull all support and watch their house of cards collapse. But we do it systematically. Here's what we set up over the next few days. First, my neighbor contacted his attorney and had all the loan documents for Dylan's car transferred to a shell LLC that my neighbor controlled. Suddenly, Dylan's car loan wasn't being paid by his loser dad. It was owned by a faceless corporation that could repossess the vehicle at will for any violation of terms. Second, the college fund. My neighbor moved the money to an account that required both our signatures to access. Amanda thought this was Dylan's money, but legally, it belonged to me and my neighbor. Third, the mortgage payments on Amanda's condo. My neighbor had been sending those payments through a property management company he owns. One phone call, and those payments stopped immediately. But here's the beautiful part. We didn't tell anyone what we were doing. We just stopped paying and waited for the natural consequences to catch up with them. Tuesday, I got a call from Dylan asking why I seemed weird on Sunday. I told him I'd been thinking about our conversation and decided he was right. I was a loser with nothing valuable to offer. Since he and Amanda had Chad now, they didn't need support from someone with no ambition or drive. Dylan tried backtracking, saying he didn't mean it that way, but I cut him off. "No, Dylan, you were very clear. Your mom upgraded from a loser to a winner. I get it. You don't need me anymore." Wednesday, my neighbor and I grabbed lunch, and he was tracking all the accounts on his phone, waiting for the first signs of panic. "Mortgage payment was supposed to process yesterday," he said, grinning. "Amanda's going to get a very unpleasant phone call soon." Thursday night, my phone started ringing. Amanda, crying and panicked. The mortgage company had called. Payment was 3 days late, and they were starting foreclosure proceedings. Her credit was about to be destroyed. "Jake, I don't understand what happened. The payments were automatic." I told her I'd decided to stop enabling her lifestyle. If Chad was so successful, he could handle his wife's obligations. Amanda started screaming about how this would ruin her financially, and I said, "Sounds like a problem for your successful husband to solve." Friday morning, my neighbor called me laughing. "Dude, your ex-wife called my property management company asking who had been making the payments. My secretary told her the account was closed due to client dissatisfaction with beneficiary behavior." Amanda apparently asked what that meant, and the secretary said, "Your family insulted our client's son, so he terminated the arrangement." The best part? Amanda had no idea my neighbor existed. She thought some random business had been paying her mortgage as a favor to me, and now that business was cutting her off because of Dylan's behavior. Over the weekend, Dylan called me 6 times. I let every call go to voicemail. The messages were a real journey. Started confused, got frustrated, ended desperate. Message 1. "Dad, what's going on? Mom's freaking out about some mortgage thing, and she won't tell me what's happening." Message 2. "Dad, call me back. This isn't funny anymore. Mom's been crying all day." Message 3. "Look, if this is about what I said Sunday, I'm sorry, okay? I was just repeating stuff Chad told me. Just call me back." Message 4. "Dad, please." Mom's crying, and Chad's being a complete jerk about the money situation. I think they're fighting. Monday morning, Amanda called me at work. She was beyond panicked now. Not only was the mortgage in default, but she'd gotten a letter from some law firm about Dylan's car loan being in violation of terms. "Jake, what did you do?" I explained calmly that I'd reevaluated my financial priorities. Dylan had made it clear that I was a loser with nothing valuable to contribute to his life. So I decided to stop contributing. "You can't just stop paying for things," Amanda screamed. "Watch me," I said, and hung up. Tuesday, my neighbor called me at lunch, absolutely cracking up. Chad had apparently gone to his bank to ask about taking over Amanda's mortgage. The loan officer told him that with Amanda's credit now damaged and their combined debt-to-income ratio, they'd need a $55,000 down payment to refinance. Chad's response? He told Amanda to figure it out because he wasn't destroying his credit for her poor financial decisions. Wednesday brought the first real panic. Dylan showed up at my apartment after school, looking scared and confused. I let him in, offered him a soda, and waited for him to talk. Dad, what's happening? Mom says you stopped paying for stuff, but I don't understand why. I reminded Dylan of our Sunday conversation. He'd called me a loser and said his mom had upgraded from me. I was simply accepting his assessment and acting accordingly. But you can't just stop helping us. Why not? According to you, Chad's successful and I'm a cautionary tale. Surely your successful stepdad can handle things I was managing as a loser. Dylan got quiet, really quiet. Finally asked, "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing," I said. "You made your choice clear. Live with it." Thursday, the car situation exploded. Dylan came home from school to find a tow truck hooking up his Mustang. Apparently, my neighbor's LLC had declared the loan in default and was repossessing the vehicle. Dylan called me screaming. "They took my car. Some company said the loan was in default, but that doesn't make sense." "Huh," I said. "That's weird. Maybe Chad can co-sign a new loan for you." "Dad, I need my car. How am I supposed to get to school? How am I supposed to get to work?" "I don't know, Dylan. You said I was a loser who couldn't fix his own problems. Maybe ask someone who's actually successful." Friday evening, my neighbor and I were at our usual coffee shop when Amanda walked in. She looked terrible. No makeup, hair a mess, clothes wrinkled. She spotted me and marched over. "Jake, we need to talk." "I'm having coffee with my friend," I said. "This is my neighbor, by the way. My neighbor, meet Amanda." My neighbor nodded politely. Amanda ignored him and launched into this desperate speech about how Dylan was sorry, how they needed my help, how she'd made a mistake encouraging Dylan's disrespect. I let her finish, then said, "Amanda, Dylan called me a loser and said you upgraded from me. You didn't correct him. So I'm letting your upgrade handle things from now on." She started crying right there in the coffee shop. It was pathetic. The next week was when things got really ugly and everyone's true nature came out. Monday, Dylan didn't go to school because he had no transportation and was too embarrassed to ask friends for rides. Amanda had to leave work early to drive him to his part-time job at a local grocery store, and Chad threw a fit when she asked to borrow his BMW. According to my neighbor's sources, his secretary was friends with someone at Chad's office. Chad told his colleagues that Amanda was financially irresponsible, and he was reconsidering the marriage because of her hidden debts. Tuesday, Amanda showed up at my workplace. My supervisor came to get me and said, "Jake, there's some upset woman in the lobby asking for you." Amanda was there in full mode. Designer purse, expensive outfit, acting like she owned the place. She started making a scene, telling my supervisor that I was destroying my own family and being financially abusive. My supervisor looked at me, looked at her, and said, "Ma'am, Jake's one of our best technicians. If he's not paying for your expenses anymore, that sounds like a personal problem." Amanda got loud, saying I was obligated to support Dylan and that she was going to make me pay for abandoning my responsibilities. My supervisor asked her to leave. After she left, my supervisor pulled me aside. "Drama with the ex?" I gave him the quick version. My supervisor shook his head and said, "Kid called you a loser? That's messed up. You make good money doing work that actually matters." Half these office guys couldn't change their own oil filter. Wednesday, Dylan tried a different approach. He brought Mason over to my apartment after school. They'd taken 2 buses to get there since Dylan had no car. Dylan had clearly coached Mason to help guilt me. Mason started talking about how Dylan had been really depressed, how he missed hanging out with me, how maybe we could work things out. I looked at Mason and said, "Did Dylan tell you exactly what he said to me last Sunday?" Mason shook his head. Dylan tried to interrupt, but I continued. "He called me a loser and said his mom upgraded from me. Said guys like me are why America's falling behind other countries." Mason's eyes went wide. He looked at Dylan like he'd never seen him before. "Dude, you actually said that to your dad?" Dylan started making excuses. He was stressed. He didn't mean it. He was just repeating stuff Chad had told him. Mason wasn't buying it. "That's really messed up, man. Your dad's always been cool." Mason left early, and Dylan started crying. Real tears, not manipulation. Asked what he could do to fix things. I told him there was nothing to fix. He'd shown me how he really felt, and I was just accepting reality. Thursday brought the nuclear option from Amanda and Chad. They showed up at my apartment together. First time I'd seen Chad since the divorce was finalized. Chad was in full finance bro mode. Expensive suit, fake smile, trying to negotiate like this was some business deal. Started talking about finding a solution that works for everyone and putting emotions aside. I let him talk for about 2 minutes, then said, "You done?" Chad started again with some nonsense about how Family obligations don't just disappear. And I cut him off. Let me explain something, Chad. Dylan called me a loser. Amanda didn't correct him. You've been telling my son that I'm a failure. So I decided to stop being their safety net. You wanted to be the successful one? Congratulations. It's your show now. Chad's mask slipped for a second, and his real personality came out. You can't just abandon your financial responsibilities because your feelings got hurt. Watch me. Amanda started crying again, and Chad got frustrated with her. Stop crying, Amanda. This is exactly the kind of emotional nonsense that creates these problems. That's when I knew their marriage was in trouble. Chad wasn't supporting her. He was annoyed by her. Friday afternoon, my neighbor and I were having coffee when Dylan walked in. Kid had taken 2 buses and walked 4 miles to get there. He looked exhausted. He sat down without being invited and said, "Sir, my dad says you're his friend." My neighbor nodded. "That's right. Can you talk to him? I messed up really bad, and I don't know how to fix it." My neighbor looked at me, then back at Dylan. "Kid, what did you learn this week?" Dylan thought about it. That Chad's not going to help us. That my mom's scared. That my friends think I'm a jerk for what I said. And that my dad was doing a lot more than I realized. My neighbor smiled. That's a start. The second week was when their whole fake lifestyle completely imploded, and it was absolutely beautiful to watch. Monday, Amanda got served with foreclosure papers at her workplace. Her supervisor called her into the office because she'd been crying at her desk and missing important meetings. When Amanda explained the situation, her supervisor basically told her to get her personal life together or find a new job. That evening, Chad came home to find Amanda packing boxes. She'd decided to move back in with her sister, rather than lose the condo to foreclosure. Chad was absolutely furious. Not because she was leaving, but because it made him look bad to his neighbors and colleagues. According to neighborhood gossip, my neighbor had sources everywhere, Chad told Amanda she was embarrassing him, and that if she had any self-respect, she'd handle her problems without involving him. Tuesday, Dylan walked 8 miles to my apartment after school. Kid was getting desperate. He'd been bumming rides from friends, but they were getting tired of it. His social life was falling apart because he couldn't get anywhere. "Dad, I'll do anything. Just please help us." I asked Dylan what he'd learned from the past 2 weeks. That I was wrong about everything. That Chad's a jerk. That you were helping way more than I knew. And Dylan broke down completely. That I'm spoiled and stupid and I ruined everything. I waited for him to compose himself, then said, "Dylan, I spent 17 years trying to teach you respect and gratitude. You threw it in my face and called me a loser. Why should I believe you've changed in 2 weeks?" Dylan didn't have an answer. Wednesday brought the best news yet. My neighbor called me laughing his head off. "Dude, Chad got fired." Turns out Chad had been using his work connections to try to solve his personal problems. He'd been asking colleagues to invest in some scheme to bail out Amanda's mortgage, promising returns that didn't exist. Someone reported him to HR for using company resources for personal business. Chad was out of a job with a non-compete clause that prevented him from working at any competing firm for 18 months. Thursday, the full truth came out. Amanda called me sobbing, admitting that Chad had served her with divorce papers. He was claiming the marriage was based on fraudulent representation because Amanda hadn't disclosed her financial problems. "Jake, he's taking everything. The house, his cars, everything. He says I tricked him into marriage by hiding my debts." The prenup Amanda had signed was ironclad. She was about to be homeless and broke. "Sounds like your upgrade isn't working out," I said. Friday evening was the crescendo. Amanda, Dylan, and Chad all showed up at my apartment together. Chad was desperate now. No job, no way to pay his massive mortgage without Amanda's income, reputation destroyed in his industry. Chad tried to act like we were all in this together. "Look, Jake, we're both men here. We both care about Dylan. We need to find a solution." I looked at this pathetic guy who'd been calling me a loser for months. "Chad, you told my son I was a cautionary tale. You said guys like me are why America's falling behind. You refused to help with basic expenses while I covered everything. Now you want my help?" Chad's desperation was showing. That was business talk. I didn't mean anything personal. Everything you said was personal. Now it's personal for me too. Amanda tried one last manipulation. "Jake, Dylan's your son. You can't punish him forever." I looked at Dylan, who was standing there looking broken and scared. Kid had learned the hard way that his upgrade was a fraud. "Dylan, what do you want to say to me?" Dylan took a deep breath. "Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong about everything. Chad's not better than you. I was stupid and mean, and I hurt you. I don't deserve your help, but I'm begging you anyway because I don't know what else to do." I looked at all three of them. The gold digger, the fake finance bro, and my son who'd learned a very expensive lesson about respect. Here's what's going to happen. I let them sweat for a full minute while I decided exactly how much mercy they deserved. Spoiler alert, not much. Chad, I said, get out of my apartment. You're not family, you're not my problem, and you're definitely not my concern. Go figure out your own situation. Chad's face went red. You can't just... I can and I am. Doors behind you. Chad looked at Amanda for support, but she was too busy panicking about her own situation. He tried one more pathetic appeal. Jake, be reasonable. We're all adults here. My neighbor spoke up from the corner where he'd been watching the show. Chad, my friend told you to leave. I'd listen if I were you. Something about my neighbor's tone made Chad realize he was outmatched. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Now it was just Amanda, Dylan, and me. The real family meeting. Amanda, I said, you've got 72 hours to move out of that condo before they change the locks. After that, your housing situation is your problem. I'm done paying for your backup plans. Amanda started crying again. Jake, please, I have nowhere to go. Dylan needs stability. You should have thought about that before you encouraged him to disrespect me. You made your choice when you picked Chad's lifestyle over basic decency. Dylan stepped forward. Dad, what about me? What do I have to do? Here's where I laid out the terms. Dylan, you want my help? Here's the deal. You're moving in with me full time. No more weekends. You live here now. You're transferring to the public school in my district. No more private school. Dylan nodded immediately. Okay, yes. Whatever you want. I'm not done. You're getting a job. Minimum wage, after school, and weekends. You're going to learn what it means to work for money instead of just expecting it to appear. Yes, sir. And here's the big one. You're going to community college for 2 years before transferring to a state school. No private college, no finance degree, no following in Chad's footsteps. You're going to learn a real skill that actually helps people. Amanda tried to interrupt. Jake, you can't just decide, I can and I am. Dylan wants my help. These are the terms. Take it or leave it. Dylan looked at his mom, then back at me. I'll take it. Whatever you think is best. That's when my neighbor stepped forward with the final twist that nobody saw coming. Dylan, you seem like you learned something these past few weeks. Dylan nodded. Yes, sir. I learned I was wrong about my dad. About everything. My neighbor smiled. Good. Because I've been watching this whole situation, and I wanted to see what kind of person you really were. Your dad never told you, but I'm the one who's been paying for most of your life. Dylan's eyes went wide. What? The college fund your dad's been building? I funded most of it. The mortgage payments that kept your mom's credit intact? My money. Even the loan for your car. I co-signed it because I believed in your dad's judgment about you. Dylan looked like he was going to be sick. Sir, I had no idea. That was the point. Your dad wanted you to think he was providing everything, even when he needed help. That's what real men do. They protect their family's dignity even when it costs them their own. My neighbor pulled out his phone and showed Dylan a bank statement. I'm worth about $8.3 million, kid. I look like a regular guy because I don't need to prove anything to anyone. Your successful stepfather made $155,000 a year and spent every penny trying to look rich. I make that much in investment income every month and drive a beat-up truck because I don't care what people think. Dylan was speechless. Amanda was staring at my neighbor like she'd never seen him before. So, here's the real lesson, my neighbor continued. Your dad is one of the most stand-up guys I've ever met. He works hard, he provides for his family, and he asks for help when he needs it without letting his pride destroy his relationships. Meanwhile, you called him a loser because he doesn't drive a fancy car. Dylan started crying again. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I was so stupid. My neighbor looked at me. Jake, what do you think? Has he learned enough? I studied my son. Really looked at him. The entitled brat was gone, replaced by a scared kid who'd learned that actions have consequences. Dylan, answer me honestly. What do you think success means now? Dylan wiped his eyes and thought carefully. Being someone people can count on. Taking care of your family. Having real skills that matter. Not caring what other people think as long as you're doing the right thing. And what do you think about your old man now? I think you're the most successful person I know, and I think I'm lucky you're willing to give me another chance. I looked at Amanda, who was watching this whole exchange with growing horror as she realized how badly she'd messed up. Amanda, Dylan's coming with me. You can visit when you get your life together, but he's not going back to that toxic environment. Amanda nodded, defeated. Jake, I'm sorry. I got caught up in the lifestyle and forgot what really mattered. Yeah, you did. Figure out your housing situation. Dylan's got a real future to build now. Update? 6 months later, the kid who called me a loser. All right, you degenerates asked for an update, so here's how this whole shit show played out. Dylan's been living with me full-time for 6 months now, and holy shit, what a transformation. Kid went from entitled private school brat to working at an auto shop after school, making minimum wage and actually saving money. Yeah, you read that right. The same kid who used to blow through hundreds. Like it was Monopoly money is now excited about his $200 paychecks. He's pulling straight A's at his new public school, and his friends actually respect him, instead of just tolerating his rich kid tantrums. Turns out when you're not a complete asshole, people want to hang out with you. Revolutionary concept, I know. Amanda? She moved back in with her sister and got a second job to pay off her debts. The foreclosure went through, but she's slowly unfucking her credit score. She actually admitted she got caught up trying to keep up with people, which is rich person speak for, I spent money I didn't have to impress people I didn't like. But here's the beautiful part. Remember Chad? The finance bro who thought he was hot shit? Dude's now selling cars at a dealership and living in a studio apartment. His whole identity was built on money he didn't actually have. So when he lost his job, everything collapsed like a house of cards. The BMW got repossessed. The fancy house went into foreclosure, and his prenup meant Amanda got jack shit in the divorce. The irony is fucking delicious. The guy who looked down on me for working with my hands is now trying to sell cars to people like me who actually have steady jobs and good credit. My neighbor, the secret millionaire next door, has basically adopted Dylan as his financial literacy project. Kids learning that real wealth is built quietly over time, not displayed through expensive toys you can't afford. Dylan joins our coffee meetings now, soaking up wisdom from a guy who made $8.3 million by being humble and smart instead of flashy and stupid. The college fund is back under our control and actually growing. Between Dylan's job earnings and what my neighbor and I contribute, he'll graduate debt-free if he keeps his head on straight. Last week, one of Dylan's old private school friends reached out wanting to hang. This kid rolled up in his parents' Mercedes, bitching about how they only gave him $200 for the weekend. Dylan listened politely, then said he had to get to work. Later, he told me, "Dad, listening to him complain about getting $200 for free made me realize how ridiculous I used to sound. I make $200 in 2 weeks at the shop, and I appreciate every dollar." That's when I knew the lesson had really stuck. The best moment came when Dylan ran into Chad at a gas station. Chad tried to act all friendly, asking if Dylan missed the good times. Dylan told him school was great, he was working hard, and he was proud of the life we were building. Chad made some comment about how Dylan would come around eventually and realize what he'd given up. Dylan's response was perfect. I didn't give up anything real. I just stopped pretending fake stuff mattered. Chad walked away without another word. Now Dylan's researching trade schools, specifically automotive technology with business management. He wants to build something real, with skills people actually need. Dad, I want to be able to take care of my family someday, the way you took care of me. The kid who once called me a loser now introduces me to his friends as my dad, who taught me everything important about being a man. And that's worth more than all of Chad's repossessed watches combined.